Welcome to Business Continuity Planning in 3 Steps. I'm Melanie Lockwood-Herman. I'm the Executive Director of the Nonprofit Risk Management Center, and it's my pleasure to be your presenter today. As you'll see on this first slide, I've included my phone number and my email address. I welcome your questions about any of the subtopics we're going to cover in this session, questions about business continuity planning in general, questions about risk management, questions about risks that your agency faces, anything along those lines. Please feel free to reach out to me. The Nonprofit Risk Management Center, which is the organization that I lead, is a national organization that works to inspire effective risk management among leaders of nonprofits and public entities. And our ultimate goal is to help leaders take bold, mission-advancing risks. We have a sense that many organizations are pretty risk-averse and need to gain confidence and develop greater confidence about the risks they face in order to take more risks. In terms of the program today, I want to start by defining business continuity planning, and then I want to share some thoughts about how to develop a business continuity plan or engage in business continuity planning in 3 simple steps. And then I want to share some tips and takeaways and close with resources that I think you'll find helpful. So let's start with the definition of business continuity planning. Essentially, business continuity planning is a planning process that helps us do 2 things. The first is it helps us keep absolutely necessary functions running during a period when normal operations have been either interrupted or disrupted. And business continuity planning explains and outlines and provides a plan or a pathway for how we're going to restore other functions or activities as soon as possible. So the presumption here is that during a period of interruption or disruption, most organizations will have to curtail or cut back on some of the programs and services they offer. So what's the purpose of BCP? Well, let's recall the definition. It's the planning process that helps us keep necessary functions running during a period when normal operations are disrupted. And it's the planning process that helps us plan for how we will resume other aspects of our operations as soon as possible. So the core purpose of BCP is to ensure that the continuity of mission-critical functions and programs, regardless of the reason for the disruption. And another core purpose is to help your team think about and reflect on the steps that you'll need to take to get your facilities and your programs back in operation. So a typical business continuity plan might outline an organization's need for workspace, for equipment, for technology, communications, relationships with vendors, and any other supports that are necessary to keep those core programs and services available, even if your normal facilities, systems, or equipment are inaccessible or have been damaged or destroyed. So now let's talk a little bit about why BCP is so important to community action agencies. So by undertaking a business continuity plan, by engaging in this discipline, by undertaking this process, it will help you determine which activities must be sustained no matter what during a period of disruption. It will help you determine which activities can be interrupted and then for how long. And it will also help you determine how you're going to maintain those time-sensitive operations in the immediate wake of a crisis or other business interruption. So many people equate and sometimes confuse disaster recovery with business continuity planning or crisis management with business continuity planning. So I wanted to take just a minute to explain some of the differences. Disaster recovery generally refers to the process of restoring data and applications should your data center, should your servers, or other technology infrastructure become damaged or it was destroyed. Whereas business continuity planning refers to a strategy that lets you operate with minimal or no downtime or service outage. So it's all about keeping certain things running no matter what. A colleague of mine who's based in Australia by the name of Grant Purdy says, you know, risk management is not about certainty. It's about living with uncertainty. And that's really the world that we all live in. And we've got to start to expect interruptions. So in 2020, it was a global pandemic. Next year, it might be something completely different. But interruptions happen to all organizations at some point in their history, situations where you can't operate under normal conditions. So now I want to contrast crisis management versus business continuity planning. So crisis management typically refers to the process of managing in the face of an emergency, a disaster, or a catastrophe. Whereas business continuity planning is about keeping those critical functions running during a period when normal operations are disrupted, and identifying strategies and plans for resuming other functions that had to go offline. So let's just talk for a minute about whether the source of the interruption is important. Does it change the business continuity plan? So the most beneficial business continuity plan will actually be broad enough so that it's useful no matter what the source of the interruption is, right? Now, some organizations are drawn to creating plans that are based on certain types of events, right? Or certain types of emergencies. So a plan to deal with the damage in the wake of a hurricane or to prepare for severe weather. And although this type of planning is useful, right, you should have some plans related to the specific weather events and other crisis events that you can anticipate that are relevant to where your organization is located. I would encourage you, as you put together this business continuity plan or as you update the plan that you already have, that you think about focusing less on the type of interruption or the source of interruption, but on the implications of the interruption, right? On the systems and strategies and activities and functions that can no longer be delivered or operated normally. So that's the suggestion I would make. And the fact is that many different types of interruptions have the same types of impacts on systems, on people, on equipment, and so forth. Now let's talk about business continuity planning in 3 steps. All right, step 1 is to decide on who and what. So I want you to think about who is going to be responsible during a period of disrupted operations. And you've just had this experience with this global pandemic. So I want you to reflect a little bit on that. I also want you to think about who should be at the table and kind of in conversation to talk about planning for an interruption. Whose perspective is key? Whose perspective is so important as we plan, as we create this business continuity plan. And then I also want you to think about what's the scope of our plan? Are we thinking about the impacts of multiple events? Are we thinking about creating plans for specific events? Are we going to include our backup plans and our contingency strategies? And are we also going to include detail on all of the vendors, the public safety agencies, the partners, all of the groups and the people that we rely on to deliver services? Step number 2 in this 3-step process is to conduct what's called a business impact analysis. And you can see from the website ready.gov this definition of BIA. The website says a business impact analysis predicts the consequences of disruption of a business function and process and gathers information needed to develop recovery strategies. It's a little bit of an academic and a formal definition, but I kind of want to show you some of the things you want to be thinking about as you do a business impact analysis. So the key in doing this BIA, and this is the most difficult part of business continuity planning, it's where so many agencies get hung up, right? They get stuck here. So I want you to think about this and reflect on this because it is an important part of the process. The essence of this part of business continuity planning is asking, how long can we not do this without causing serious detrimental effects on our agency, right? Whether those be financial losses or client unhappiness or penalties, even legal or compliance penalties. How long can we stop doing this? And you're basically going to look at all the programs and all the functions in your agency and walk through this step of asking, how long can we take this activity offline? If something happened, if a disruption occurred such that we could not deliver all of our services and we had to make some hard choices. Now, what makes this hard is that if you engage members of your team who are each responsible for different functions and programs and activities, each member of that team is going to believe that their area of responsibility is very important and should continue no matter what. Very few people are going to raise their hand and say, you can just take my program offline for a month. There will be no detrimental effects if our program is shut down for 6 weeks, for 12 weeks, and so forth. So that's where it really gets difficult, is that no one in an agency really wants to admit that their program could be taken offline for a period of time. So you kind of want to ease into doing this. So some of the questions that are helpful in doing this business impact analysis are things like, what are the processes that are necessary to deliver services? How long could each process be down? Which functions can be done manually if an automated process is not available? What equipment and supplies are needed to perform those functions? And who are the vendors and suppliers that we need to reach out to if we have an emergency? So we've actually created a fillable PDF. We're calling it the Business Impact Analysis Worksheet. I hope you find this helpful. We've created it with a lot of thought and care, really to make it easier to do a business impact analysis, knowing how groups get bogged down and have difficulty doing this part of business continuity planning. And so in the middle of this worksheet, you'll see reference to maximum acceptable downtime. So that's a term in the BCP world. And what we've done is we've created 4 different groupings, right? So if the maximum acceptable downtime is 8 hours, then a function is vital. If that maximum acceptable downtime is 30 days, the function is important. And notice that I've chosen these words really carefully. So the functions that could only be offline for a very short amount of time are vital. The next down those functions are critical, and then those functions are essential, and the functions are important. So I chose those words instead of words like critical, helpful, or unimportant, right? Nobody wants to be told or to acknowledge that their function or service, the thing they work on every day, is unimportant. So again, we've used important, essential, critical, vital to distinguish between different functions and services and activities in your agency. So basically the process is to identify key functions and activities, then to indicate what the maximum acceptable downtime is. And again, it's based on the number of hours or days that this function or activity can be offline. And then the third step is to identify recovery timeframe and strategy. So how will you deliver this program or services? How will you get this back up and running? Or is there an alternative way to deliver that program or service? So because this is a fillable PDF, you'll see these bluish boxes. You can fill in the spaces under key function or activity and really list all those functions and activities in your agency. And then you use the drop-down menu to choose the maximum acceptable downtime. You could do this in a workshop with a team of staff, or you can have people do it individually and come back together and kind of compare notes. And then you use the space under the recovery timeframe and strategies section of the worksheet to start to document some of the recovery strategies you have in mind. So step 3 in the process is to put your business continuity plan together. I would encourage you first to incorporate lessons learned from COVID-19 and other disruptions, losses, near misses, and successes. I would encourage you to organize your document so it provides a clear roadmap. I would encourage you to incorporate continuity strategies. So examples of continuity strategies include things like reciprocal agreements, right? An agreement with another agency. If your facilities are damaged and you can't operate from those facilities, you might agree with another community action agency or another nonprofit in your community that you will work out of their offices or use their equipment if your equipment is damaged. That's a reciprocal agreement. It's a really simple way to kind of have a backup plan for operations, thinking that something could happen. Something could occur that would make it impossible to work from your main headquarters. Your continuity strategies might include remote work plans, as something that most organizations experienced during the pandemic is the need to suddenly have staff working remotely. You might have a Schedule B, a backup plan for scheduling, for program delivery, and so forth. And then another aspect of putting your business continuity plan together is reviewing a draft, creating a draft and presenting that to a team of people. It could be the management team, it could be representatives of all the functions and programs within your agency, putting that together. And I encourage you to in this discussion, as you share this draft plan, I encourage you to ponder these questions. Will this help us move efficiently when we face another interruption? Is this plan a roadmap essentially? What's missing? Right? How can we improve this plan? Will we all know what to do? And how often should we update this plan? Should we update it every time we face an interruption and then reflect back on whether the plan was helpful? So as you think about business continuity planning in your community action agency, I want you to remember that to a large extent, it's about people. Who's going to be doing what? It's about functions and programs. What are all the functions and programs and activities that are part of this organization? And again, how long can they be taken offline? And how do we resume them in an efficient way? It's all about resumption strategies, because ideally, following an interruption or disruption, you want to get things back up and running again. You want to resume normal operations. And it's also about mitigation. So the term mitigation really refers to the idea that we want to reduce the cost or the damage of an interruption, or the losses associated with an interruption, or the harm caused by the interruption, right? We want to mitigate those damages and losses. We've also created a COVID-19 lessons worksheet. It's also a fillable PDF. And we thought that, it's such an important time to step back and reflect on some of the lessons and insights from how your agency has coped and handled and operated in the face of a global pandemic. And so we've created this worksheet. It starts with what happened, and you can indicate any aspect of COVID-19 that your organization experienced. I want you to identify the silver lining, ways that your agency has improved resilience. I want you to identify the dark cloud, how you were not prepared or not as prepared as you wanted to be or would have liked to have been, or you'd like to be in the future. And then also some lessons and takeaways. And you can use this lessons worksheet for any crisis, for any interruption, for any time that something doesn't go the way that you hoped it would. You can kind of use this worksheet to capture the silver lining. There's always a silver lining in any crisis or catastrophe or disaster. There's usually a dark cloud, and it's a way to capture those lessons and takeaways. Many times after an experience, we say to ourselves, I won't do that again, or I've learned my lesson. But if we don't take time to write things down, we often don't learn from the experiences we have as leaders of organizations. And then this is also part of that worksheet, learning from wins, near misses, and failures. Another tool that I hope you'll consider using to kind of capture those lessons from these various experiences. So on this particular worksheet, and it's part of a suite of worksheets that are all available as a single PDF, starting with the business impact analysis worksheet. With this worksheet, the first thing you do is you choose from the drop-down menu, was this a success, was this a near miss, or a failure? So again, this is a way to broaden and capture those lessons learned from not only the pandemic, but other things that your agency has faced. And then I want to encourage you to fill in that second column with what you were trying to learn or achieve or demonstrate, right? What were some of the causes? There's rarely one cause for a loss or a failure. Usually multiple causes. And so this worksheet prompts you to try to identify multiple causes. And then that last column is, what can we learn from this? What can we learn from this? I hope you find this worksheet helpful. When I think about continuity strategies for different types of nonprofits and public entities, I think about reciprocal agreements. I think about the option of delaying the dates of an activity or using an alternative site. Of course, I also think a lot about staff working remotely and accessing files on cloud servers. So these are just examples of continuity strategies. In your agency, you've had a chance this year to practice many different types of continuity strategies. Think of your business continuity plan as a document where you capture everything and you have that available to help you prepare better for the future. So as you're developing a business continuity plan, I just want to remind you that it should be custom to your agency. So copying a plan from another agency generally isn't a good idea because your agency has some unique aspects, whether it's your location, the size of your team, the array of programs that you offer. Make sure that your plan really fits your organization in terms of your size and your purpose and your functions. And also the affordability of different continuity options. You know, one of the things that large companies sometimes do is have a hot site, which is a place where they have backup equipment stored and ready to go should the equipment at their headquarters be unavailable. That's a pretty impractical strategy for smaller organizations. So you want to make sure that you've kind of tailored your plan so that it really makes sense given your resources. As you're kind of going through that business impact analysis and creating your plan, I just want to remind you to ponder these questions and considerations. You know, you want to be asking, what are the costs of not delivering a specific service? What about the cost or implications of being late? You know, what's the longest a particular program or service could be offline? Are there processes, programs, and services that must be continued or sustained at any cost? You know, what can be put on hold and for how long? These are the kinds of contemplative questions that we want to ask as we're working on a business continuity plan. So let me just share a few tips and takeaways. The first is from a book called The Infinite Game. It's by Simon Sinek, who wrote Start With Why, and he also wrote Leaders Eat Last. I think The Infinite Game is one of his best books, and I love the part of the book where he talks about the courage to lead. And he says in this quote that, you know, the courage to lead is the willingness to take risks for the good of an unknown future. And the risks are real. And he says, it's much easier to tinker with the month or the quarter of the year, but to make decisions with an eye to a distant future is much more difficult. And that's really what we have to do as leaders, right? We have to plan for today and tomorrow and this month and this year, but we also need to be thinking about the far off future. And as we're recovering from one interruption, it's kind of hard to focus and think about a future interruption, but it's so important that we do so, that we plan for that far off future. Another tip that I want to share is that during any crisis or any interruption or disruption to normal, I want to encourage you to make sure you're giving everybody in your agency a role and a purpose. You know, people want to serve your mission. They want to be supportive. They want to contribute. They want to be part of the team. And sometimes in a crisis situation, people feel lost and they feel unproductive and sometimes unmotivated. And when you as a leader really strive to give people a role and a purpose, you're doing so much to kind of heal some of the wounds of that crisis and really make the most of the incredible team that you have. Another reminder is from that announcement that we hear when we travel by air, you know, put your own mask on first. And it's such an important piece of advice, such an important tip for leaders who are managing during an interruption, a business interruption or a crisis event. You know, one of the things that happens to many people is they experience what's called toxic worry. And toxic worry is worry that paralyzes you and leads you to freeze up, right? And I think when you put your own mask on first, when you deal with kind of the issues that you're facing, you're going to be in the best possible position to help others and reduce the likelihood that folks will be facing and experiencing that toxic worry, that paralyzing worry. So take care of yourself. And then the last tip I wanted to share is, or the second to last tip I want to share is about landing on your feet. And this is from an article that I read back in 2002, and it was about a skydiver. A skydiver who held the record for the most total parachute jumps made by a woman. She had made at that, as of 2019, which is later than the article was published, she's actually made 21,000 parachute jumps. And she also holds a record for the most parachute jumps in 24 hours. In one 24-hour period, she made 352 parachute jumps. Her name is Cheryl Stearns, so she's a competitive skydiver. Well, in this article, I really loved how she talks about the importance of practicing perfection. She says, take nothing for granted. And even though she's been skydiving, 21,000 jumps in her career and just has incredible experience, she's always, each jump is a new day. And she treats each jump as a new experience. And she's practicing perfection. And she also talks about in this article the fact that many skydivers don't have a plan as to where they're going to land, right? They don't have a specific spot in mind. She's a precision skydiver, and what that means is that she always has a spot that she's trying to land, where she's trying to land. She has a target, and she says, look before you leap, but know what to look for. And she actually says that people are less likely to suffer injury if they are aiming for a specific target. And then the last thing she said that I thought was really interesting was that you need the right kind of fear to be successful skydiving. And I think just successful managing an agency, leading a team, that the idea of not having any fear is actually kind of dangerous. And she says that, skydivers who are fearless actually suffer injuries, and a little bit of fear can go a long way. So some great messages and takeaways from Cheryl Stearns, an incredible person. And then lastly, kind of going back to the idea of the future and looking to the future, I want to encourage you to think about 2 years from now, where do we want to be as an agency? What 5 factors will shape that future? And then finally, what are the bold risks that we need to embrace now to get there? Just great questions to get us future focused. One of the things that happens when we're facing an interruption, like a pandemic or another crisis or disruption, is we tend to just kind of look down and focus on the today, the here and now, and we don't spend enough time looking into the future. So it's incredibly important that you do that. All right, let's wrap up with a few resources. The first is actually a fillable, a customizable PowerPoint deck from FEMA. And it's a series of tabletop exercises that you can do. So you've probably heard the term tabletop exercises. It's a way to practice kind of working through different scenarios. If this were to happen, what would we do? And this is a cool kind of fillable PDF that was created by a federal agency. You can find it at www.fema.gov/prepareathon. So I would encourage you to take a look at this slide deck and then try customizing it and practicing with your team. Shortly, the Nonprofit Risk Management Center will be releasing a new web application, which is called My Business Continuity Plan. And it's an interactive web tool to help you create a custom business continuity plan. So stay tuned for that. I hope you'll give that a try. Just a new resource. And as you know, community action agencies are members of the Nonprofit Risk Management Center, so you have access to lots of resources on our website. You can create your own login at nonprofitrisk.org. You just want to click on that affiliate login button. And if you don't already have an account, you want to create an account. And that way, every time you go to nonprofitrisk.org, we will recognize you, and you'll have quick access to all the resources on the website. All right, lots of affiliate member benefits. You can see them on this screen and learn more about them by visiting the website and clicking on that membership tab. One of the most important benefits is the ability to ask a question on any risk topic, including business continuity planning. So please feel free to use this form, but you can also just give me a call or send me an email directly. And on the website, lots of articles and fact sheets and so forth. And there's actually a newsletter that we published recently on business continuity planning. So I hope this session has been helpful as kind of an introduction and an overview of business continuity planning. I hope you're feeling more comfortable with this topic, but I encourage you to continue reading and learning more. So send me your questions, contact me by phone, contact me by email. Love to answer any questions that you happen to have about this topic. And thank you so much for listening to this program.